The question of why don't Space Marines wear camouflage is something I have seen recurring quite frequently as of late across social media. For newcomers to a fictional setting based entirely on warfare, the lack of camouflage may certainly seem quite odd. After all, one goal of any army is to ensure that its troops have the best possible advantage over another. However, there are a number of factors which makes camouflage largely redundant for Space Marines in Warhammer 40k. Now, when people ask about camouflage, it seems to me that they are likely asking about disruptive colouring. This is the non-repeating patterns on skin, fabric and armour that disrupt visual systems of recognition by enemy units. The point of contention here is that the targeting technologies available within Warhammer 40k are so advanced that very few units rely solely on their biological eyes to target an enemy. The majority of armies, including Chaos Space Marines, Tau and Necron, incorporate a complex array of advanced technologies to sight their targets, all of which demand a little more ingenuity than simple coloured patterns to bamboozle. For armies such as the Imperial Guard or Orcs who do not afford their line troops such technologies, the battle doctrine seems to favour overwhelming force once the enemy has revealed themselves. Other armies such as the Eldari, Drukhari and Tyranids seemingly rely on preternatural senses to sight their targets, which also renders disruptive colouring redundant. Another factor to consider is that Space Marine armour is so absurdly tough that the majority of small arms fire is effectively useless. It stands to reason, therefore, the only armies who would be effectively tricked by disruptive colouring would lack the necessary firepower within their line troops to pose a serious threat to Space Marines. Chaos Cultists provide a good example of this. The majority of these troops are, in effect, a civilian rabble who have been whipped up into a militia. As such, they are often armed with autoguns, pistols and whatever other civilian weapons they are able to get their hands on. Firearms that are only dangerous to a Space Marine if they are shot in the eye lens at close range. However, it is worth remembering that some Space Marine chapters such as the Raven Guard, Carcharodons and Space Wolves specialise in stealth assaults. This aspect of the lore is perhaps a little tenuous, but it seems that 8-foot-tall giants clad in monstrously heavy armour are able to effectively sneak up silently on unsuspecting foes and disappear without a trace. Given that it is frequently mentioned within the lore that the servos of power armour hum and squeak, and that Space Marines walk with a definitive clank of ceramite, there is reason to suggest that, for these chapters, the warp holds some influence over their stealthy abilities. When you consider that Space Marines are an elite unit within the wider Astra Militarum structure, then it can be suggested that Space Marines employ one specific type of camouflage. In nature, some animals use bold colours and stark lines to distract predators, keeping them fixated on specific aspects of their anatomy and failing to recognise the prey as a whole. For many Space Marine chapters, their bright heraldry contributes to the wider shock and awe tactics. Many Space Marine chapters often announce their presence on the battlefield through drop pods or gunship deployment from orbit. Often we see the Emperor's Angels appear at crucial moments in battle and serve as the fulcrum by which the battered and beleaguered Imperial Guard regiments stage a stunning counterattack. Through their bright colours and dramatic entrance, Space Marines announce themselves not only as a new foe, but also as a significant threat to opposing armies, drawing their attention away from the Imperial Guard troops, while their tough armour, enhanced physical abilities, and immense firepower allows Space Marines to effectively hold the line. By directing enemy attention onto themselves, Space Marines enable their human counterparts a moment to regroup and coordinate a counterattack. Additionally, the bright heraldry works to inspire their Imperial Guard allies. Space Marines become a highly visible sign of battlefield dominance and Emperor-assured victory, allowing the Imperial Guard to recover lost morale and urging them to fight on with renewed zeal. Finally, brightly painted Space Marines serve a more basic purpose in the midst of battle. They become a central rallying point for soldiers beset by the fog of war. In situations where the lines of communication are broken and command structures are uncertain, it is far simpler for wayward troopers to follow the lead of a big bright super soldier into battle than it is scurrying about looking for a commander and risk being shot by the enemy or a commissar. The last point to consider is that Space Marines are not exactly Marines in the conventional sense, but are the paladins of humanity. They are more akin to space knights who take notions of honour, duty and lineage very seriously. As such, their heraldic colours marks the identity of each Space Marine chapter and distinguishes one from another. This provides individual Space Marines with a loftier ideal to fight for, in that they're not simply fighting to protect a planet or a section of space, but that their deeds and even their deaths will be recorded in the annals of their chapter history. This is to inspire the next generation of Battle Brothers to achieve even greater feats than what came before. For a race of beings who know no fear, this desire to seek glory becomes the driving force of their battlefield heroics. As such, it becomes a point of pride for Space Marines to boldly proclaim their colours rather than obfuscate them for a relatively minor tactical advantage. While this video has been a rather serious consideration of the lore around Space Marines and camouflage, I will not insult your intelligence by suggesting that Games Workshop doesn't have a financial motive behind brightly coloured Space Marines. Firstly, camouflage patterns are bloody difficult to paint well and would likely serve as a disincentive for newcomers to the hobby. Secondly, there is a greater variety of coloured paints that can be sold compared to the relatively limited colour combinations for effective camouflage. Finally, bright, bold colours are visually striking and appealing, differentiating Warhammer 40k from comparisons to Call of Duty and Power Armour. I don't mention these financial incentives to be disparaging, it's quite the opposite actually. If the decision to avoid tactical Space Marines was purely financial, then Games Workshop should be commended for creating an attractive product with its own distinct aesthetic, one that has proven to be popular world over. Anyway, I have been Invicta Lawstrom, thank you for listening.